The public is invited to public hearings about the draft EIS, and the co-lead agencies consider and respond to those public comments in a final EIS. So the next slide goes into those public comment process with the DEIS or the draft EIS. Citizens and agencies provide input on the completeness of that document and the accuracy. This includes the environmental impact analysis of the reasonable range of alternatives and that of the no action alternative that's determined. It provides comments from the agencies as well as the public on the mitigation that's proposed or laid out throughout the EIS document, as well as its effectiveness to take care or to mitigate for the significant impact that's indicated. When we go through the issuance of that draft EIS, which is a while from today, there will be a public comment period associated with that, and it ranges between 60 to 90 days. This will be back when the public participation is involved. The other thing I wanted to point out with Jeannie's presentation was the public participation plan. This document, the public participation plan, will likely lay out all of this and give a good pathway as the process moves forward on when the public can be involved through that. There will be public hearings that are scheduled on the draft EIS. The public can either comment in person at those public hearings or also send written comments to the agencies. So I went back one slide. Now this is written comments to the agencies. There'll also be the indication of the website use or email use associated with this too. So this next slide is the issuance of the final EIS. This is getting into the nuts and bolts of how that EIS is prepared. So the issuance of the final EIS. The final EIS includes responses to the comments made on the draft EIS. What the final EIS will do is it'll summarize and respond to the comments that were indicated on the draft EIS. It'll explain how the alternatives, including the proposed action, were modified, if modified through the draft EIS, the final EIS process. It'll identify new alternatives that were created through that public comment that was discussed. It'll also explain it'll also explain how the analysis of the draft EIS was supplemented, improved, or modified in any ways based off the public and the agency comments that the co-lead agencies received. And it may also provide factual corrections that are noted as well. So the final EIS is the lead agency's record of environmental analysis. That's the document that at the end of this long process is what the agencies bring forward to help the decision makers on local permits make decisions and know what the environmental impacts are associated with the action or the proposal. There's a number of different permit decisions that this complex of a proposal will have, and they range from, so after the final EIS, there will be the permit decisions, and the EIS is to inform the decision makers. So before I get into the permits that are needed, this is another important part associated with the EIS process. So let's take the county for example. There are permits that the county will be issuing a decision on. And what the EIS is there to do is to inform those decision makers what significant impacts may come from the proposal, if those can be mitigated or if they can't be mitigated and there are significant impacts associated with it. So the county council in this situation and for this project proposal will have decision-making authority over the action. And that'll be staff, myself, and other staff will prepare reports to the council that will include the EIS to be used to inform their decisions as they move through the process. So you can either approve the proposal. The county council will also be able to approve the proposal with conditions, and that's if the process shows that there is mitigation, that will help to avoid the significant impacts that are shown. There's also the opportunity or the avenue that the permits could be denied. And this would be made on the applications themselves, and it would be used through substantive authority if the EIS shows that there are significant environmental impacts that can't be mitigated. So as I use an example of the county permits, but there's a number of different permits associated with the project, and we're just going to go over a list here. There's the major project permit and the shoreline substantial development permit from the county. There's a hydraulic project approval from Department of Fish and Wildlife. There's a stormwater permit as well as a water quality cert permit from Ecology. There's air quality permits from Northwest Clean Air Agency. There's Department of Army permits or Army Corps permits associated with it. And then there's also the aquatic lands lease where the Department of Natural Resources has authority over those aquatic lands. This is a partial list, and there are additional permits, but these are some of the main permits that will be applied for and decisions will be made. And the EIS will help inform those decision makers to make the correct decision based off the impartial review and analysis that's done through the EIS. So I just want to end the presentation, Jeannie and I's presentation, and then move into the question and answer. But it's the commitment that the three co-lead agencies have. And what it is the co-lead agencies are committed to a thorough and rigorous environmental review process. And that process is going to be transparent. That process is going to include the public participation from everybody in this room if you decide to comment as we move through this. But it's also important to realize that thorough and rigorous environmental review process will be done in full compliance with all regulatory requirements, whether state, local, or federal requirements as we move forward. So thank you for the presentation. I know it's a lot of information throughout the process, and it was process specific. I'll pass it over to Jane, and we'll move into some of the question and answer section of this.
So keep in mind, the questions this evening should be questions about this environmental review process, the review process that's being applied to the Gateway Pacific Terminal project. Anything you want to know about the background of what we talked about this evening, those are all questions that the panel is prepared to speak on this evening. Please hold your scoping comments, issues that you want addressed as part of the Gateway Pacific Terminal project, issues that you think are important, impacts, studies that you think ought to be done. Those are scoping. Those are scoping type questions. And those are the questions that, as Jeannie and Tyler were mentioning, need to be brought up during when the scoping process is open. So, yeah. And one of the reasons is to hold those comments that we do hear a lot of and have been receiving letters on is that it's really important for the agencies to receive them, and they will pay attention to them, but today is not the day for that. I want to remind you about the ground rules. Listen respectfully to all the speakers. Hold applause. We have about an hour. We'll go until 8 o'clock, taking questions from the audience. You're a pretty big audience. I assume there's going to be a number of people who want to ask questions. So our rules are 1 question per speaker, 1 minute maximum, so try and put your question together within a minute time frame. And if we don't get to everyone, there's going to be an open house. So from 8 to 8:30 out in the open area, the commons, we're going to have an open house. So you'll have an opportunity to speak with the agency staff then. And there's a few other things that I'll mention it when we get to the end of the question panel. So I want to introduce our panel members. There's Sam Ryan of Whatcom County. She is the planning director. Tyler Schroeder, you have met. He's the planning manager. With the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, there's Randall Perry, project manager. Department of Ecology, Alice Kelly is senior planner, and Brendan McFarland is a section manager. And with the State Attorney General's office, we have Laura Watson, Assistant Attorney General. and I will be kind of fielding questions. So the way this is going to work, I went too far. Okay. The way this is going to work, I want to introduce our two microphone monitors. Would you please stand up? This is Scott Betcher and Jeannie Fulcher. They're with the Office of Regulatory Assistance, and I also wanted to introduce my boss. Faith Lumsden is the director of the Office of Regulatory Assistance. And there's other agency people sitting in the front row who I'm not going to spend the time to introduce right now, but you can meet them when they're out in open house. I'd like people who have questions to line up either behind Scott or behind Jeannie. And keep a single file, so just fill one side of that row so that there's still room on the other side. Please you're going to have to start lines on either side. Stephanie Drake, where are you, Stephanie? Stephanie Drake's there, and she'll kind of help with the lines. But if you wouldn't mind lining up behind each Jeannie and Scott, just kind of keep moving that way, and I'd say when you get to the midline. What? Actually, thank you. Why don't we have the house lights up a little bit so we can see the audience? And then why don't you merge the line that way and merge the line that way when you get full. All right. Anything else? Anything I've forgotten before we get started on questions? Okay, let's get started. Jeannie, you want to have, and why don't you say your name and then give your question? That would be great.
My name is T. King, and my question for you, as you look across this audience of people, my question is, what makes you think any of this is even necessary? Because we say no. Right here, right now, we're saying no.
All right, so that's not really a question about the process. Is there a question in there? I think that's a comment. Okay, thank you for your comment. All right. One per person. I'm sorry, you have lots of people. So thank you very much for keeping it to less than 1 minute, and we'll go over to Scott. Okay?
Lawrence Brown, process question regarding the scoping report, the document that will preliminarily describe the suggestions for the scope, as I understand that was described. One, is that guaranteed that there will be that report, and once it is issued, will there be an opportunity for the public to respond to that report before the actual scoping is set and final?
Okay, so is there going to be a scoping report and some questions about that? Brendan?
He's on.
You have to use it.
Gotcha.
Okay, we're live. Well, the first time that you'll see a reflection of what we think the scope should be in the scoping notice that we issue, and that'll give our first take on it, and then the public will comment on that, and then this scoping report that we've described is something that we'll do that reflects what we've heard from the public and how that original scoping notice is modified.
Okay. Did that answer your question?
No.
Okay. Can you repeat the question?
After the initial report that describes the very first public input onto what the scope should be, will there be an opportunity for the public to respond to that before the scope is actually set?
Got it. The two official public comment periods will be on the initial scoping notice, and then about a year later when the draft environmental impact statement comes out.
So it sounds like the opportunity to comment would be for the draft EIS.
Yes.